Because the Venom character looks very cool, and just the concept of it is very cool, and they have nailed that. And definitely in the first two films, and based off of the footage for this third one, it's a visual delight to look at this. Welcome back to the break room. We are here talking about Venom, and we are talking about KNULL, and we are talking about the way these things could pave the path to the MCU, but only from Sony's perspective. That's a one-way street, my friends, because you know Kevin Feige's like, quick, lock the doors, pretend like we're not home.
Turn off the lights.
We're simulcasting on Twitch and on the Breakroom YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your content. Specifically, if you're on Twitch, go to twitch.com/breakroomnr. Yes, and then of course youtube.com/breakroom. Also follow us on social media.
Twitch.tv.
Twitch.tv. Gosh, I forgot the URL.
They should get the .com. You know what I mean?
They should just shell out for the .com. Twitch.
Get the .com.
Come on. But yeah, we're taking a Q&A. We're trying to do this every Friday around noon or 12:25 Pacific time in 35 seconds, and we're trying to just have an opportunity for us to do like a live Q&A. We're trying to do more of these on the Breakroom channel, but yeah, we're gonna take your questions. So whether you're on Twitch or whether you're on YouTube, hit us up in the chat. We're gonna be following the chat. We have all of our laptops out because we're just that one guy on the CNN election night coverage who has his laptop unprofessionally. We're all that guy this time.
We're all unprofessional.
We will definitely answer your question if you super chat us, but even if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. We'll just try to answer any questions that we see as it comes, but super chat's the way that it'll pop out at us and we'll answer it there. Oh, I've delayed the introductions. I'm honored to be joined today by the gentleman to my right, Brandon Barrick.
Oh, Eddie, I want to eat a chicken brain, Eddie.
That is exactly a direct quote from this trailer,
Yes.
because I have to assume, because unless you watch Sony's version of it, there's no way you can make out what anybody is saying, whether it's Eddie Brock or Venom. And not to delay the lead here, this is John Costa.
Whoa.
Hello.
Eddie, I have a basketball game to get to.
The Last Dance? I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Basketball.
Why'd they call it The Last Dance? Is there going to be a musical number? Are they going to do a waltz?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a 97 Bulls reference, right?
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I hope it is. I hope they reference these words somehow. They talk about the relationship between Eddie and Venom as a kind of tango, a duet, a Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers kind of thing. So here's what we're gonna do. Again, we're gonna take your questions about how Venom: The Last Dance will connect to the MCU, if it does, about KNULL, about what comics this might be adapting, about what might happen in this movie, and just Sony's broader plans in general. Basically, yeah, Evan is out this week, so we're doing it without Evan. So if there's technical issues,
It's my fault.
It's no one's fault.
It's my fault.
It's no one's fault. It's just we're doing things a bit differently, kind of by the seat of our pants, and we're doing our best. But we're so happy to be with you all.
I've got not quite a question, but something that we've all sort of been talking about around the office from YouTube user Jux. Maybe is that how you pronounce that? They say, knowing Sony, KNULL won't even be quote unquote in this movie, but only glimpses for a tease to another movie. Now we don't really know what's coming after Venom and Kraven, so that tease to another movie, hard to define. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Kind of like, is this post-credit scene KNULL? Do we get more than that?
I get people's skepticism with these films because it's exactly what happened with Michael Keaton's Vulture in the past film, or rather in Morbius, right? He was heavily featured in the trailer, and just to be shuffled into a post-credit scene in a way that felt pretty deceptive, but not too deceptive that people weren't willing to go back to see that movie 3 and 4 times to get it to over $20 billion of box office revenue.
It's true.
In this case, analyzing the trailer, and depending on when you're watching it, you could see our Easter egg breakdown on the new Rockstars channel. they do say the word null in the movie, and it seems like it is said at least before the halfway point of the movie, based off of the journey that Venom and Eddie are taking through the desert after they parachute down from this plane where a xenophage attacks them. So I'm willing, even if maybe we don't see Null, I would just be surprised for them to say the character's name and make him the source of the reason all of these xenophages are hunting down all the symbiotes, and why all the symbiotes are leaving Clintar or the Abyss or wherever they're coming from. He seems to be like at least an off-screen villain for most of the plot, and I don't think they would show him in the trailer if we didn't at least cut to him. Now, does that mean we're gonna get like a big fight between Null and Venom? Maybe, maybe not. But I think he's not just going to be a post-credit villain. I think he is going to be like a central figure to the plot of the story.
And this is sort of a negative version of that same question from Super Chat from Samil Battenfield saying, how bad do you think they'll mess up Null? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sony doesn't have a great track record with this kind of thing. But I'm also curious, like, okay, what is your opinion on that question? But also, do you think Null will ever kind of leave that, I don't know where Null is positioned in that trailer, his domain? Do you think that we'll see Null leave that space, or are we going to have to go there?
I was wondering the same thing, like, is Null on Earth at any point?
Right.
And I would think no, right? Like, they're not going to, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
To bring Null all the way to Earth just to fight Venom and not deal with any other entity that's on Earth at the time.
Yeah.
It seemed like a waste.
I don't think he's gonna leave. I think that there might be some kind of, they talk about the 80 billion light years of hive mind across universes that all these symbiotes share, and I wonder if there's some kind of like psychic link that they have. That there's like some kind of like a mental projection version of Null that they fight, or that like maybe all the goo of all the different symbiotes is kind of connected, like physically as well, and that like Venom's consciousness could kind of awaken back in another puddle of goo that's back in the Abyss, and that consciousness has to fight. Because I'm thinking, I just don't imagine Eddie being there, so we'd have to see a version of Venom without Eddie, and I think they will get separated in this movie. I think that is going to happen, but it's just then what does Tom Hardy do? What does the star of this movie do back on Earth when that fight is happening? Right? It's kind of hard to imagine. I don't look. To mess up Null, we're not talking about messing up, Kamala Khan.
It's okay.
We're not
suggesting.
Null is a very awesome concept and a very cool idea that they use to establish the origin and the mythology of the symbiotes. But let's just be real here. Venom as a character is a very recent character in Marvel Comics. That emerged from the late 80s and really only gained popularity in the 90s, and only had its first cinematic appearance in 2007, and then has had these 3 movies that have had no bearing on what Venom is in the comics.
Very true.
So I don't think we need to look at Null as like overly sacred. I think they have a wide bandwidth of choices they can make for Null, and so long as they hit a couple key elements, I'm going to be satisfied with Null. And so far, based off of like the way he's being described in this trailer footage and the way he's being shown as this long silver-haired thing surrounded by xenophages on a very like interesting looking throne room in what I would imagine the Abyss to be, where we see the sweeping shot of all these like entombed symbiotes that are pale and lifeless. I think that's conceptually very cool. But for people who think that the only way Null will be justified is if we see him pull out the Necro Sword and decapitate a Celestial, well, be prepared to be disappointed, because that's not going to happen in this movie. That's we're not going to see him forging a sword.
You don't think he'll have the sword at all? You don't think Sony's like, oh, well, we looked at the wiki and he has a sword. We should probably give him a sword.
You're right. Maybe he has
didn't
a
even
sword.
bother checking to see if
Will Christian
that's
Bale
something...
show up in the post-credits?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it has something to do with this spider guy. I had a bunch of kids, and they took them away from me.
Oh no! Those
no.
poor kids. Put them back in those cages.
GSU Eagle was wondering over on Twitch if Null's interest in Eddie Brock could be because of the fact, or Venom, could be because this Venom just crossed multiverses, and maybe Null's like, oh, you got a little mojo on you I want to steal, like, or something about the fact that he's been in a different universe that has attracted Null's attention.
What was the line at the end of Venom 2? that he said, he alluded to KNULL, or this kind of like symbiote network.
I think that was the 80
like,
billion
hive
light years
mind,
of
yeah.
hive mind.
Okay, that's
The
right.
hive
Yeah.
mind, yeah.
Like whatever universe he hops into, he connects to the Wi-Fi, and he's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I know everything that goes on here."
Yeah, he said across universes, and so I'm kind of wondering. I think the multiverse is a reason why. I wonder if like KNULL is kind of trapped in the abyss, this chasm between the 6th cosmos and the 7th cosmos, and his goal is to try to crack into this multiverse network, but due to the laws of the cosmos, created by whomever. Screenwriters by Avi Arad,
Yeah.
Tom Rothman, or realistically in the Marvel lore, it would have been the Celestials, or would have been Eternity, or the Watcher maybe. None of those characters are going to get referenced in this movie, but just some kind of, they'll describe it as like the laws of nature, or the creators, the ultimate creators of this universe trapped him in this chasm, in this abyss, and he's trying to like find a way out. And just through this mistake of Peter Parker tampering with the runes of Kafkal's spell in Spider-Man No Way Home, it ended up like reaching out to all these other relevant canon event people in the multiversal Peter Parker's life. Whatever the web of life and destiny decided, like, hey, this person's in kind of Peter Parker's top 8, to use a MySpace term. Let's bring them into the MCU, and that's why we got Norman Osborn and Doc Ock and everybody else. And then they also grabbed an Eddie Brock. But that Eddie Brock was latched to a Venom, was latched to that hive mind by extension, and that created this mistake. It broke the law that to trap KNULL, and I think KNULL is sensing that. He feels a little like pull on his pinky toe, and he's like, "Wait a minute."
That pinky ring wasn't supposed to show up for another 2 weeks. This must be something else.
What is it? There's like old tales of people tying fishing string to their toe, and then they sleep under a tree, and then when their toe tugs, they know they caught a
The fish is on the
the fish. That's basically what KNULL feels, and I think so he wants control over that power and doesn't want that limb of himself to be separated from the rest of his hive mind.
I think that's how I would like my Sony Spider-Man universe, where it's, the MCU affecting the Sony universe rather than the other way around, right? You're talking about the spell from No Way Home kind of affecting this movie. I think that would be a wise decision on their part, rather than trying to like do what they kind of did with Venom 2, where the goo was, left over, and it was like, well, is the symbiote now in the MCU? It just like doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Hey, keep sending in your super chats. We don't have anyone behind the scenes today. It's just the three of us here, so that really helps us kind of like find these questions. We have one from MC No Light that is asking or saying, I'm also of the belief that KNULL will be barely in this movie. He'll probably be noted as the source of the issue, right? We see all of those, xenophage creatures. He'll probably be noted as the source of the issue, but I feel like he'll have very little screen time in the form of quick flashes. I think that feels right, and there's a bunch of people in the comments that agree with that.
Yeah, I get that. I just think like these Venom movies have all been pretty short, and I don't trust Sony's marketing generally.
Yeah, I mean, the Morbius marketing was so deceptive.
The poster that's not in the movie,
Not in
right?
the movie.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
shot, he doesn't even walk past that wall in the movie.
No, they put, that was insane. And Madam Web's marketing was deceptive. Craven's marketing even seems to be deceptive. I just haven't had, the Venom.
Craven's marketing said the movie came out 2 years ago.
I just saw that trailer yesterday. I think these Venom movies have been the one, I don't want to say the one watchable, but like the most successful with what they've done, because at least they understand that the reason people are watching these movies is because the Venom character looks very cool, and just the concept of it is very cool, and they have nailed that. And it definitely in the first two films, and based off of the footage for this third one, it's a visual delight to look at this.
And I think Tom Hardy is like really trying in these movies, and I mean that very earnestly. Like, he's not phoning it in with these performances. Like, he's really going, and he cares about to maybe to doing more harm than good. He's getting involved in like the behind the scenes and the writing and like what he wants to see the character do. Like, he clearly has a vision for this character, and he's game to be silly with it. But I'm just wondering what their end game is.
Do you think he's being silly with the voice?
Yeah.
Or do you think he takes that really seriously?
I don't. Well, when I mean silly, I mean he's willing to be like, yeah, Eddie Brock gets dragged through chicken shit or something like that. You know, like he's willing to make the character look goofy.
You're right. We saw
the jump in the lobster tank.
We saw
It's
the
like,
crazy like rave
Yes.
scene in the second
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. He's really thinking like, what's it like for this man to have an alien symbiote attached to him and infecting his thoughts, right? It's driven this man insane. He can't have a relationship. What does that mean?
I think he views this as a buddy comedy, Tom Hardy. And I think in that regard, that genre, he's crushing it. But it leads us to not taking this seriously.
Right.
And that is not always what Venom is in the comics. And that, I think, has always been an issue for me, the decision to have Tom Hardy also voice the Venom character. I think they should have brought in another actor to do it, someone who he could have had off-screen chemistry with, someone who could have done a mocap for it.
Yeah, it's surprising that Andy Serkis, who directed the first movie, didn't.
Or the second movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ruben Fleischer did
would have
the
been an
first.
interesting choice to have him come in and play that.
Yeah.
You talk about the comics being a little bit more serious. We have a super chat from Momo Akib asking any comic book recommendations about KNULL specifically.
Yeah, I really do think they're pulling from like the Venom Rex storyline by Donny Cates. There are some analogs that you'll notice when you read that where there's the Grendel character that they seem to be swapping in with the Xenophage. You have Rex, who seems to be swapped in potentially with Detective Mulligan as Toxin in this movie, and I think they recolored Toxin to be green in this movie. We don't see it in this trailer, but there was like another still that was pulled from like an international promo or something like that, where there's like a new green symbiote, and I think that's going to be Toxin. And in Steve Graham, I think, is the actor who plays Detective Mulligan who's in Boardwalk Empire. His eyes glow green when he's in the containment cell. So he kind of plays that character, and in those comics, his text is outlined green. So I think there might be some parallels there. But that storyline specifically is a really good KNULL storyline that you get to see like the origin of the mythology of the Venom. That's what I'm saying. This is all very recent. Like that comic came out in the past 10 years. So to say that this movie could ruin KNULL, there's like not much there to ruin yet. Just don't make him lame. Like make him a fearsome, deadly, ruthless being who makes like calculated, logical, god level decisions. It's just like we have seen so many Marvel movies where the gods are just as stupid as humans are, and just as petty as humans are. And I want gods to be as smart as like Vision is on his smartest day. You know?
Okay.
Like they should have that kind of divine foresight and not get caught up in like petty whims, unless, and I go into this in the trailer breakdown, if KNULL is connected to the symbiotes through a hive mind when Venom becomes a gambling addict, does that put a bit of dopamine in KNULL's brain,
and
where he gets a taste of like gambling addiction, and that starts to humanize him in a way that weakens him? Cool, but we just need to see an example of KNULL being badass and kind of an Old Testament god, a kind of Lucifer figure, because he was like, empowered by the Celestials to kind of be a cosmic caretaker, and he was pissed off that the Celestials were neglecting his kingdom of darkness, and he's like, you know what, screw this, and then he just decapitates one of them, and then uses that head as a forge to temper the sword, and then started building symbiotes in his own image in a very cool way. So kind of a Lucifer fallen angel figure, and that's what I want to see.
Let's get a special presentation of that.
Yeah, let's do it. Just like collaborate, make this like a shared character the way you use Tom Holland in your Spider-Man movies.
This is a fun super chat from Stacy C, who asks, who would you each cast as an MCU Eddie Brock against Tom Holland? And I'll say, I want to hear your opinion also if you want to see Tom Hardy do it. But in addition to that, if it couldn't be Tom Hardy, let's hear who you would like cast.
I don't. Having Tom Hardy show up in the MCU as a villain when you've spent 3 movies with him as the protagonist, I don't like it as like, oh, suddenly he's bad now and he wants to kill Spider-Man. Like, I don't really buy that motivation. If you bring Tom Hardy to the MCU, I think it's like a team-up version of Venom where like he's working with Spider-Man. That's only because they've made him a protagonist. Again, if you want your villains to be villains, let them be villains. Like, I don't want Tom Hardy being the villain to a Tom Holland Peter Parker.
Yeah,
I think that's silly.
there's too much of an age gap.
Yeah.
You need an Eddie Brock who's a true rival photojournalist in the Daily Bugle newsroom. And with that regard, I mean, this will never happen, but Timothée Chalamet.
Sure.
Chalamet and Tom Holland together.
Get Zendaya back for
Right?
Spider-Man 4.
Right? Let's go. I mean, that'll never happen. There's so many other ways you can use
Right.
Chalamet, and I don't think Chalamet wants to do it. He got that special advice from DiCaprio, never do superhero movies.
He's got his Wonka verse to think about right now. He can't be going.
He's got Dune Messiah to train up for.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
What about Glenn Powell? I say make Glenn Powell like an evil Eddie Brock.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Peter Parker were older, I mean, Tom Holland is what, 28, 29? This movie, the next time we see him in a movie, he'll be...
Right.
He's going to be shooting it next year, probably, so he'll be a little
I
bit
think
older.
you could have like a little older Eddie Brock. It might be fun. Nah, and we joke all the time, but I'm really pulling for this guy to get into the MCU, Austin Butler. And I'm not doing the voice here or anything. He
Why
would
not?
be a fun Eddie Brock, like an angry, cool Eddie Brock.
Sure.
Comes into town, strolls in with his camera, taking photos. This little twerp Peter Parker, who I heard dropped out of high school. He's taking his gig. He's taking money out of my wallet, out of Eddie Brock's wallet. Someone's got to kill this kid. And it's gonna be Eddie
Yeah,
Brock.
I do
He
think
never
he could
even
be
becomes Venom.
unhinged.
It's just Eddie Brock the serial killer. And it's Austin Butler.
I'm gonna say screw Eddie Brock. I want to see Tony Revolori as Flash Thompson be Venom.
Sure. Yeah,
I just really think that Tony Revolori playing that character would be very fun, and I like him a lot. And on a personal note, he's a good person. So.
Yeah, I think it should be a kid who, like, we've seen this actor kind of grow up the way that we've seen Tom Holland grow up, so we have that attachment to him. Because, like, what was so great about the Topher Grace casting is we had Tobey Maguire, who we had seen kind of grow up in films, and then Topher Grace was just this kind of smartass from that 70s show who would, like, make other appearances in films sometimes. So, like, in a way, we saw him as a teenager as well. So I really liked him as Eddie Brock in the Sam Raimi movie. So I think we need someone who like didn't get into Midtown High because he wasn't a STEM student.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he always kind of had that. He had to go to the local area high school.
Yeah.
and there was teacher shortages, and the gym teacher had to teach like pre-calc.
He was down there in Gen Pop. It was tough.
Yeah, that's rough.
It's tough.
So I think he should have that anger. He should be someone who's like always wanted to put dirt in Peter Parker's eye, right?
Hector's hanging out in the
Ooh,
Twitch
hi,
chat.
Hector.
He was wondering, could KNULL's connection to Thor in the comics be played out in any way in this film? Probably not. Or a future MCU movie. Do you think Kevin Feige has put KNULL on the big board at some point? I mean, they must have like talked about it in Thor 4, right? With the necro sword and everything. They must have been like, this is Last Dancing, pretty close to Sony's meal ticket right here.
Yeah.
But one day you have to wonder if they're gonna do this symbiote story in the MCU, if Tom Holland's Peter Parker is gonna find a little black suit goo at some point. They must be thinking like, what's Null got to do with it? Side note,
got to do with it.
does Null get to go to those meetings that we saw in Thor 4 with like the Celestials? And, is Null invited and he never shows up?
Maybe that's why, because Noel
He's like
just doesn't get an
Maleficent.
invite.
He doesn't get the invite. He just shows up.
Fabulously throws like a green flame.
Beautiful. I'll send you straight to hell.
I think like a Null is like the closest the Venomverse can get to Celestials. So that's why they're doing it. Is that's as high as they can really get into the cosmos, because Marvel has the Celestials, has Galactus, has everything else at that tier. Like, can we think of anything else like on the Spider-Man? I guess Madam Web and
Madam
the Web
Web,
of Life and
yeah.
Destiny, but she's not a god, a creator god of the universe.
You mean I'm not a god?
You'd have to create. I think if anything, you could have Null, and then maybe you invent some other kind of like spider god figure. You have the spider totems
Will they
from
have
the
in
Ezekiel Sims
Spider-Man
comics.
Turn Off the Dark, Arachna or whatever?
Oh.
What was her name?
Oh my gosh.
That's IP. That's IP. It's
Who could
there.
remember
It's
that?
canon.
There is a canon multiverse where it's
Let me
musical.
dig into my memory from going to that show when I was in 8th grade.
Proud of you. Proud of you.
You can't get those YouTube hits out of your head.
No,
300 some
they're
odd days
gone.
in
They're
previews
gone.
or something like that. Beautiful stuff.
This is
yeah.
a truly disgusting suit. Oh, did you have
Okay.
more on that?
No, I don't. Well, to Hector had asked, I just think that if we ever see Thor's mythology
Yeah.
or gore, it would have to be in Secret Wars. Like, it'd have to be like when all these studios decide to profit share on like just a massive $1 billion
What if
movie.
the Thor frog gets the Venom goo? And the
Oh.
Thor frog becomes
On the
a Venom?
You know
frog
what?
is-
if you gave me an animated show with the gooey Thor frog, I'd be into it.
I'd be into it.
Speaking of Secret Wars,
eggs over there.
you gonna keep going?
No, I'm done.
Speaking of Secret Wars and team up films, Lewis Cox with a truly disgusting idea here.
Okay.
Could have Madam Web team up with Morbius and Venom to stop KNULL or someone else.
That's what they're gonna do in a
Get Kraven
Sinister
in there,
Six
too.
movie at some point, right? I think we haven't heard anything
If
about
the Sinister Six become heroes in a movie, I'll be sad.
That's what's gonna happen.
They're
all
They're
anti-heroes.
all
right now.
protagonists of their own films.
Yeah. It's just they.
Sinister Six is like not gonna fight Spider-Man, and it's gonna be insane.
I think
They're
Craven
gonna
will
be
will tell the studio what they can really do with this because
Aaron Taylor Johnson's gonna walk in there and be like, "Hey,
no, I mean like the success of it. That's their holiday movie. If that movie underperforms the way Madam Web did and Morbius did, I think they're gonna have to like.
Craven's
completely-
angry at Santa Claus for keeping the reindeer out of the natural population. Forcing them.
He bites off Santa
he's
Claus's
an
nose.
Animal Liberation Army.
He bites off Rudolph's nose and then spits out the glowing, blinking light.
Solaris333 in the Twitch chat with a truly great name for the Sinister Six movie, the Supportive Six.
oh
They
yeah,
become the good people.
sponsored by BetterHelp."
Yeah, I think what Sony wants to do, I mean, just by having that Morbius post-credit scene of Vulture and Morbius meeting and talking about Spider-Man in a way that made no sense.
No sense.
If I assume Venom: The Last Dance will be successful for the studio, all these Venom movies have been pretty good, and this trailer is a fun trailer.
Right.
They've done a pretty good job making me feel like, oh, this will be a fun way to spend 100 minutes.
Yeah.
But the other movies of the franchise have just been so laughably bad that I don't know if you can get people to come see this lineup of heroes in a Sinister Six movie.
Yeah.
And I will feel so disappointed if they call it Sinister Six. Like, I don't. But are we ever going to get a real good Sinister?
I don't
Six
know,
movie?
and it's weird too that these are the villains they've chosen, right? And it's like you guys can do a Green Goblin movie or like a Doc Ock movie. Some
wonder
of the
if
more
they can.
popular villains, but I think they're afraid to do it because, like, well, to do that we have to have Spider-Man, and we don't trust ourselves with Spider-Man. We're relying on Marvel to handle that storytelling right now. So they're kind of left with these weird villains that they feel like, well, we can have them in a universe where there is a Spider-Man, but they've never interacted with him, and he's never created a problem for them. But they're aware of him, and they're just in different cities doing their thing, and they always come up against a version of themselves that's more evil that they have to stop.
Yeah.
It's just weird. It's very weird.
Well, Sony's plan, I think, just based off of Madam Web and Morbius, and I guess not Venom now. Venom kind of throws a wrench into what I thought this plan was going to be, was grounding these supernatural effects that these heroes bear with them in nature, right? So Morbius, bats in South America, Madam Web, famously,
A spider
Spider
in the
Amazon,
Amazon.
baby.
right, and the Aranya tribe, who had this kind of mystical connection, right?
Yes.
They were able to like see the future, and if they're able to like say that KNULL is part of it, and maybe KNULL is like there's like a two God universe, you know, the way that we have God and Satan. You know, like KNULL is like kind of the Lucifer figure to there's some other kind of spider god that is like a force of good in this world,
Okay.
and is trying to keep KNULL at bay. So maybe all of these things, all these mystical connections through animals and through the animal kingdom, this spider god who controls the web of life and destiny has encoded this kind of like fate into all these things, and that's how all these characters have gotten their powers. It doesn't really work for Michael Keaton's Vulture because he just is like a blue collar cleanup guy who created a great suit using Shatari tech. So I don't really know how that works. But yeah, I'm trying to think like, oh, someone at Sony thinks they figured it out because they read an Ezekiel Sim spider totem comic, and they're like, oh, here's a way we can do it that's different than Marvel Studios. And it's probably Avi Arad like, you can do it this way if you want. And they're like, okay, great. That's different. I just don't think it's going to be effective because it misses the charm, and you can't do this without Spider-Man, as you said.
right.
And unless they're willing to pay Tom Holland, or I think the smarter path would be to do a Sinister Six movie and just have Andrew Garfield and have it take place in his universe.
Completely.
You know?
Would you want, and I don't think this is something that we would get, would you want to recast or even get different villains for that eventual Sinister Six movie.
Because like,
Even though it does
'cause
feel
they
like this is
started
the
to
group
tell-
that they're
yeah.
marching with, it does feel like, you know, they set up a different Sinister Six in The Amazing Spider-Man 2
Right.
with a couple of other
Right.
people.
Could they just scrap everything and like go back to that?
I don't
And
know.
you start a movie in media res. You're in the middle of the story, and through a series of flashbacks, you learn about these 6.
I mean,
folks.
the
or does the general populace know enough of the villains? You don't have to tell the Doc Ock story. You don't have to tell the Green Goblin story.
I think that the Insomniac Spider-Man game did the Sinister Six
Sure.
really well, and they did kind of do that. Half of the Sinister Six was like hardly really introduced in that game until that Prison Break, right? If I'm remembering that game correctly. I thought they did a good job with doing that, where you had like, okay, yes, there are 6 of them, but you know, really, it's only these couple that are the main villains of the movie, and then like, you know, we fill out the other 6 with other characters.
Yeah, I think what needs to happen is Sony, Tom Rothman, and whoever they want to put as a director of like a Sinister Six movie needs to come out and do a press conference, or just wait till Comic-Con or CinemaCon or something like that and say, we are scrapping it all. We're not bringing back Jared Leto. We're not bringing back Dakota Johnson. We're not bringing back Aaron Taylor Johnson. We thank all those actors for their work, but we are starting over with the Sinister Six movie. We're bringing back Andrew Garfield, and then here's our lineup. And you can do that, not just from the Insomniac
DC's doing
version.
it, right?
DC is doing it. The 2018 Into the Spider-Verse movie had various cool different versions. You had Olivia Octavius. You had a
so
different
good.
Kingpin. Now they also had like a Scorpion and a Tombstone. That whatever. But there's like a Prowler in that movie. You can have multiple villains in a movie and just cast interesting actors to do them. Write a great script and get Andrew Garfield to do it. And please just like start over, because like I don't want to see these characters again.
Yeah.
I don't need to see it again. And if this is like the Venom's last dance, that's fine. He can cross over into a different universe. He can come back in Secret Wars, sure. But like, these movies were not successful enough creatively or commercially to justify seeing them merge together in a movie.
And I think that the only marketing that people would be excited about for those movies is the label Sinister Six. Right?
Yeah.
Like no one, well, not I shouldn't say no one, but like I think general audiences aren't excited to go see another version of this Madam Web, another version of this Morbius.
Yeah.
We have a couple more super chats here. Momo Akib sent in another one. Thank you so much. How do you feel about having KNULL as a big villain for Spider-Man 4? If that happens, how could they incorporate street stuff with Daredevil? We kind of think that Kingpin and Daredevil are going to be key figures in that.
I think if you have Null as the villain in the story, you can't have Kingpin. Those are just two different like classes of villain,
Right.
And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's like if you do a Null storyline, I want like to take a lot of heroes to defeat Null, right? As you point out, he's like a big capital G god. I want it to be harder than just like Spider-Man's gotta make a wish upon a star or
Plus,
something.
he has
to
no
beat him.
Stark tech anymore,
No
right?
Stark tech.
So
Getting beat
he's a
up.
little
Come on,
underpowered.
Spider-Man, you can do it. You can pick up the... No, you can do it, Spider-Man. Come on. You have to participate. Don't forget your prescription. You gotta pick up... God damn it. I wish I still had Edith. Oh!
Did we answer that question?
Yeah, I think we answered. No, I think there's a lot of talk just from Null being in this trailer that he's going to be the villain of Spider-Man 4, because we also had this news of Destin Daniel Cretton directing. I just think Marvel Studios has other gods if they want to go in that direction in a story that's set firmly in the MCU. So I just don't see Null as having a relationship to Peter Parker necessary for him, unless you'd have to make Spider-Man 4 a true Peter Parker symbiote story. You'd have to do the black suited Spider-Man. You'd have to do Peter Parker gets infected. You'd have to kind of redo parts of the 2007 film. You'd have to have it like maybe an MCU version of Eddie Brock, or at least just like a black suited Peter. And then just through that connection, they'd have to establish another god, which arguably that's easier to do because the MCU has established gods through Thor: Love and Thunder, through the Eternals, through Moon Knight, and through Black Panther. So just to have another god in that pantheon actually works in the MCU, but it's just I don't think Null has a relationship to Peter.
Yeah. I also want to shout out John Briggs asked a similar question. Do you think Null will carry over to Spider-Man 4? I think we all kind of agree, maybe not Spider-Man 4, but like a Secret Wars type of thing if there was going to be a crossover, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it feels?
They would save it for like a bigger thing.
Yeah.
I think.
Go
Sarah
ahead.
Hatch Dorian asking, Who do you think would be the funniest animal to get venomized? If the promo art's true, we know we're gonna see a venomized horse in the film. We've seen it in the trailer a couple times.
Yep.
There's been some promo
saw the
concept
fish,
art
I
of
think.
like a fish on a wall, a great looking frog, just a really good looking frog.
Was
And
there
more-
a turtle?
more
Or did I
the
make that
horse.
up?
I think
A
you
lot
made
of
up the turtle.
aquatic. Okay.
I think an octopus. Well, no, the octopus is too easy. Now that I think about it, I think
Yeah.
a bird of some sort would be funny.
Yeah, when an animal becomes
penguin.
venomized, does it lose some of the things that like could an venom octopus no longer squirt ink?
Oh, that's a great question. Would it squirt more goo?
No, I think because it enhances whatever abilities you have, right? It makes Eddie Brock stronger, and he heals.
Oh, and he
all
can
that.
salivate.
He can salivate.
Uh-huh.
So I think, yeah, he would. I think it would enhance whatever natural abilities you have.
Right.
So if you can produce ink, you can produce some ink.
I'd like to see a venomized blue whale, the largest
it's
creature on
huge.
Earth.
Okay, here
just
you go.
really, really large. Like now, you're getting into like my TikToks of the
Yeah.
different phobias of just the giant, Cthulhu
Right,
creature
right.
in the beast in the sea.
If anyone knows more comics than I do, could that blue whale then become a land animal?
Yeah, because
probably,
you're
right?
encased inside
You
of
think?
the thing. Yeah.
Ugh, I hate that.
It could get legs and just walk around and be like, "Where's the krill? No krill on land. What am I doing here?
I don't like that.
What am I doing?" What about a swarm of bees? Each one with its own little venom suit, flying around, but it has the hive
And then
mind.
instead of producing honey, it produces more goo.
more goo. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It just makes goo.
I like the bees. This whole story.
Venomized
Bees is
bees.
good. Bees is
Oh
good.
no, you combine Ant-Man and you venomize the ants, and now you control the venomized ants, and that's how you beat Kang. People still are mad about that. I don't know why.
They did it in an episode of What If.
Yeah.
Christian Ford asking, thank you so much for your super chat. Voss, you talented, awesome SOB.
I thought it said slob.
You
Also would have been
Slob.
It's also true. Who wants to see Andrew Garfield go against the villains is unhinged.
Yeah.
The bitter years he refers to Tom Holland.
Right, yeah, from No Way Home, where he's like, there were dark times, and it could be set during those dark
Sure,
times.
that would be
So
interesting.
still could be set after the 2014 Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now you might have to do something slightly differently from that movie because it was all like technological Sinister Six, and there's gonna be Drew Goddard was gonna direct that Sinister Six movie, and then Sony just didn't. They reset everything, but you could revisit that period of time
Bring it back.
where he just gets really dark, but it would negate the way Andrew Garfield's Peter ended that film.
Yeah.
Like he was in a better place. We saw him over like several months gradually healing. The seasons changed, and then he helped that stupid little kid, and he slung the manhole cover. That kid, nothing against the actor. It's just that kid was just, what the hell are you doing in the street, kid?
Yeah.
Like that is why
He wanted to
Vigilante-
see a rhino.
and he thought he was so inspired by Peter Parker that he thinks he can fight like
Yeah.
murderers
Yeah.
in the street who cops are getting killed by in that
don't-
moment.
I don't know if you
It's Johnny
remember-
Storm all over again.
Yeah.
all of the concept art or the fan art, I should say, of Tobey Maguire when he was like super grizzled when we thought that he was going to show up in No Way Home, and then eventually did. We put in a bunch of thumbnails. I do want to see that version, but for Andrew Garfield, where he's just like, I'm over it. I don't want to be here, but the
Yeah.
city needs me, and I have an obligation.
I don't
That
wanna
would be
around
fun.
anymore.
Here's a question that I have for you guys. This is a classic Breakroom question. You said earlier in the show, Eric, that you think that Eddie and Venom are going to get separated at some point. Movie is called The Last Dance. It wouldn't be a Breakroom if we didn't ask, do you think Eddie Brock kicks it in this movie? Is he going to make it out of here?
Eddie Brock dies?
Yeah.
No, I don't think Eddie Brock dies. I think Venom might die. Like the Venom as we
okay,
know him might
sure.
die and be reborn.
Okay.
Like
That's
Fox,
the post-credit.
the Phoenix.
Venom Born
okay.
Again,
Yeah,
18
yeah.
episodes,
Yeah.
2026.
I just think like there's going to be a use for him from Sony's perspective. And I think narratively, this story might work better if Eddie Brock were to die by the end of it.
Yeah, right.
But
some stakes.
no, I don't think they will. I think they're like, we still want to try to make this work. We want to put him on screen with Leto and Johnson and Johnson.
What is Eddie Brock's happy ending? Because it's always been his happy ending in these movies is learning to live in the symbiotic relationship with Venom.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are truly separating them and Venom it goes away for good from Eddie, what does Eddie do? What is his life after this?
Back to
Mexico.
back to Vice style journalism.
Or that. I think go to that bar in Mexico and just chill.
Just
live
chill?
out the rest of your life, hanging
Okay.
out.
I don't love it.
Yeah.
But okay.
Well, that's why I think like
I think Eddie might die in this movie. I think they might just kill him off.
Like, he's moved on from Anne, right? And I think that, like, he has been so codependent with the Venom character that there hasn't been a ton of character development for Eddie across these movies.
Right, yeah.
Like, he was established as, like, this hard-hitting, cool journalist and who was just investigating the Life Foundation in the first movie. And now it's just, like, this goofy buddy
Yeah,
cop
no one
story.
knows who he is.
And then, you know, he had this relationship with Cletus Cassidy in the way that, like, true crime there was, like, kind of a commentary on true crime podcasting in the second movie. I don't know if that's going to be there in this movie. Like, I don't think any kind of Eddie Brock as a journalist. I'm just not seeing it in any of the trailers what Eddie Brock's career is and what his life on Earth is like. He's just screaming as Venom is dragging him through the desert.
Yeah.
Which I think I might like that better. Like, I'm not saying that's bad.
Horses can fly. Eddie screaming. Absolutely.
On the outside of an airplane, just great stuff.
Yeah, hey,
just
you know.
great stuff.
Christian Ford, thank you for another super chat. I think I know the answer to this one. Voss, my nerd guru, he says, Craven or Agatha?
In what regard?
That's it. That's the question.
If you could spend one night with either of them?
Yeah, exactly. I think just what is your out of those two? What are you more anticipating?
Oh, Agatha, of course.
Yeah.
Like, I'm that may not align with all of you. I just think, like, it seems like Marvel Studios and Jack Schaefer and the cast and crew of Agatha seem to know what they want to do with that story more than Sony seems to know what they want to do with Craven. Like, I love Aaron Taylor Johnson as an actor. I'll watch pretty much anything he's in. It's just the trailers to that film have not given me confidence that movie's going to deliver the goods and be a good Craven story.
Right.
It feels like to have a good Craven story, you need to have a Spider-Man movie. Or you need to have a Spider-Man in the story. And that has been like a flaw that Sony just keeps ignoring with all these movies, is that, like, they don't work without Peter Parker. And Venom has just skirted by,
Yeah.
but it's still missing something. All of these movies have been missing it.
You have to assume that they can't put Spider-Man in any of these movies. At least Tom Holland, right? The contractual agreement between
Well, I'm
Marvel
sure he would not do
Studios,
it 1,000%. He
Sure,
would just not allow
he's
it.
seen the track record
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Like, I feel like they would have put some kind of Spider-Man, I guess technically in Madam Web, whatever. You'd think that would have happened by now if there wasn't some, like, legal reason to not. Maybe that's a boring topic of conversation, is like contracts.
I think it's they're legitimately afraid they'll ruin everything if they put a Spider-Man in it.
Well, here's like a pitch. Don't get Tom Holland on the call sheet. Just have a hand whipping things.
Sure.
And there's just like another stunt actor wearing a kind of different Spider-Man suit that's in the shadows. You can't really make it out. But there's like the silhouette of a Spider-Man in this universe that is at least having some impact on the world in some way. Like these worlds don't even reference the existence of Peter Parker. And I think that they just feel like so divorced from anything Marvel related. They feel like Marvel in name only.
That would be a fun kind of flip on the genre. I think in a lot of Batman movies, you see like villains being afraid of Batman acting in the shadows. It would be cool if the protagonists in this movie were afraid of a Spider-Man like working in the shadows, and we only see their perspective as the anti-heroes seeing that happen, and we could be almost afraid of Spider-Man or something like that.
Yeah, I think Sony maybe rightfully fears that if you mention the existence of a Spider-Man in the story, people are just going to be like, why didn't you have more Spider-Man in it?
Yeah.
Or it becomes too much of a Spider-Man story. But just these characters as written on the pages of comics are most of the time not compelling enough to merit their own film adaptation unless they have this relationship with Peter Parker. Madam Web is an interesting concept of a character, but they tried to make her the protagonist of the story. And what is so cool about Madam Web, both in the comics and in the animated 90s series when she was voiced by Joan Lee, is just how over the top she is.
Right.
She's a clairvoyant. And there's a lot of like goofy imagery and stylized performances that are supposed to go with that. Craven is supposed to be kind of like, you know, someone who's wearing a lion mane on himself, who's got like a tooth necklace, and he's crazy, and he walks around New York as a bounty hunter, a big game hunter.
Right.
And that's not what's going to happen in this movie.
And he thinks he's the world's greatest hunter, and you're going, sir, I didn't even know that was a title people achieved.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't someone you took the title from. No one has ever been like, I'm the world's greatest hunter. And you're like, great, awesome for you.
Yeah.
Just incredible stuff.
Some teenage asshole.
And he's like, no, you don't understand. I am the world's greatest hunter, and I've gotten so good. All that's left for me is to hunt a man who is part spider. And you're like, great. I really appreciate that from you, sir.
Yeah.
We love that.
I love that. For
There
you.
are better characters in the pages of comics and the pages of all fiction in video games that Sony has the licensing to and could make movies about, but they're just trying to have it both ways.
Hypno Hustler.
With having like these peripheral Spider-Man villains, and they just don't understand their audience. We don't want to see Morbius as the hero of a story.
I think I catch what you're saying. These all should have been like Sherlock Holmes stories. That's what you're saying. Craven versus Sherlock Holmes. Don't worry about Spider-Man.
Literally.
You said it in the 1800s. It's Craven. He's going around London. He's hunting people because he's the world's greatest hunter. And Sherlock Holmes has got to stop.
Yeah, if you were to strip away the name and whatever the comic book reputation is for these characters and just go into a studio and pitch this as a story, they'd laugh you out of the room. Because these are not good movies. These are not good. That's not a good idea for a movie to pitch that. Like, the only reason they're being made is because you can say that it's Marvel affiliated. Or
And
in
they burnt
association.
all the goodwill that fans had for them when they were like, we're going to make these, standalone villain movies. Fans were like, okay, we'll hear you out. And they constantly just burn the goodwill. And I think they burn the goodwill of the actors, too, who sign on to these films. They shoot a film, and then it gets shelved for a couple years, either for whatever circumstances, but usually so that the film is then tweaked. And then they're brought back, and maybe they shoot some more stuff, or maybe stuff is done that they are not involved in.
Yeah.
And then the film they are presented at the end is not what they thought it was going to be from the beginning. Not what they signed on to do with the character, and then they are forced to promote that and be like, "This is the film. That's what it is. Had a great time."
Yeah, in fairness to the actors, they get paid, and that's
Well,
often
sure,
the job
sure.
of the actor in any project they sign on to do. Most of what the work they do over their careers is not good work.
I will say it is so sad to me to see articles where it's like Sony Marvel actor reaches out to MCU Marvel actor for advice in working in MCU, and I'm like, it's not the MCU. I wish that your agent had told you that. We have a couple more super chats to get to, but then we have to go, unfortunately. This one from Joe Wills Art asking, with KNULL from the comics being, quote, above a Thanos level threat, do you think he'll be carried across multiple films? If so, what films, MCU, etc.? I think we talked about this earlier, Joe. You might have joined a little bit late, but just to hit that again, Eric, your thoughts?
I think KNULL is considered a deity figure, and Thanos is an Eternal who is called the Mad Titan, but it's kind of like a tier beneath that. I think power level is all relative in these movies, even within the MCU. You could have these thought experiments of can Wanda beat Thanos, or how does Captain Marvel's
classic
power?
big question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think Null's relative power level from the comics means that he automatically gets a gateway into future MCU projects. I just think Sony is using him because he is like this established god figure with a connection to the symbiotes that they can they can use to establish a mythology and kind of an origin story for these alien beings. But I think what Sony would like him to do by specifically needing Eddie Brock and Venom as like multiverse travelers is like use them and kind of piggyback on them to break out of the abyss. So I think Sony might kind of open the door. It's going to be on Kevin Feige's side if he wants to let them in through that door. And I don't think he will. I think we might get references to if Venom shows up in Secret Wars, maybe we get a reference to like his god. He might be like, well, my creator was a monster who lived in an abyss kingdom who hunted me down. Yeah.
And then our last question here from Christian Ford. Again, thank you so much for sending in these super chats. Think we'll ever get a live action Ronin TMNT?
Sure. I think so. I don't follow TMNT that much, but they've been pretty valuable for who owns them? Paramount, I think.
Paramount,
yeah. I think Mutant Mayhem was a pretty big successor.
Yeah, and that Ronin comic was like very, very popular. And I thought I read that they were like developing or trying to develop that story. I wouldn't be surprised. And like a fandom like the Ninja Turtles seems to be pretty chill with like, we're gonna tell this story and it's separate from everything else. And they have their little universes set up pretty well, where there doesn't seem to be much incongruity with like, they already told that story over here, blah, blah, blah. No, they can jump around, they can tell whatever stories. Because the last Ronin story kind of is set in like the future of that world, where the turtles are older. So it would be interesting, and I think they could do it. And would you want it to be live action?
Yeah, I think they
Not
probably
a Michael
feel like
Bay
they have
live
a good
action,
thing
but-
going with the animated thing. Or the
And that was
animated
great,
movie.
but that is like a young story, right? The
Yeah.
turtles are very young in that,
Right.
and they're voiced, and it's all
They are
great.
teenage.
The Ronin is like a very serious, like older story. That would be cool to see them do in live action, like the old movies.
Bring it back, the practical
practical
costumes. Screw the
costumes.
CGI stuff.
Come
All right,
on.
Sarah Hatchadorian snuck one into the last minute. Sarah, we have to go. There's someone waiting for us on the other side of that door. Now that Eric has answered which he's more excited about, Agatha versus Craven, now can he follow up with who he'd rather spend the night with?
Oh, who I'd rather spend the night with, Agatha or Craven? I mean, is it
Those abs on Craven are hard to resist.
all of it? Hey, look, is it too much to ask for both?
That's a great question. I think,
mean,
yeah.
Agatha-
There's some stuff in the Darkhold about a threesome, I'm sure.
I'm sure we can
She
make it
comes
work.
from the old times, and they got freaky in the old times.
Picked up
you
a
know
few
what I
tricks
mean?
along
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way. Picked up a few tricks. I feel like knowing what we know about Agatha's character, Craven would be more generous of a lover, whereas Agatha would probably just be looking for a way out.
She doesn't want a coven.
Yeah.
You know, she's a
She's
lone wolf.
yeah, lone
Yeah,
wolf.
yeah.
But hey, Sarah, and then Ryan B, Ellie, Chaya, and Lost Pond, Phil, and Lewis Colson, all of you, thank you so much for joining us in the stream, and thank you for just hanging out with us on this Friday afternoon. It's been great to talk Venom with all you guys.
Absolutely. We're going to try to do these Q&As every Friday, and I saw a couple of people asking when the breakdown is coming out, like so soon.
Like
So
literally
it's
in
almost
minutes.
ready to go. Keep refreshing YouTube Hangout for a little while,
Yeah.
and that should be ready for you guys. Hey, again, like Eric said, thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Later, skaters.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.